This is a BBC podcast. You can get all our podcasts and our terms of use at bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Sunday is gloomy, my hours are slumberless, dearest the shadows.
BBC World Service. This is Helena Merriman with The Y Factor.
Little white flowers will never awaken you, not where the...
If you can, I want you to stop what you're doing and listen to this piece of music.
Angels have no thought of ever returning you. Would they be angry if I thought of joining you? Gloomy sun.
You might not have heard it much on the BBC before. It was banned from the airwaves for being detrimental to wartime morale, and the ban was only lifted 10 years ago. Which leads us to this week's question. If gloomy music makes us feel so, well, gloomy, why do we choose to listen to it? Now, remember how this song made you feel, as some of the research on the effects of sad music may surprise you.
My name is Amanda Stern. I'm a writer and a producer who lives in Brooklyn, New York, and I listen to sad music in order to cry. There's a James Taylor song called Riding on the Railroad, which I played for my stepfather after he had a massive heart attack. He was in the hospital, and I asked him if he was scared, and he squeezed my hand, and I asked him if he wanted to listen to music, and I put my Walkman on his ears, and it was Riding on the Railroad.
Take your side and step along.
He lived that night, and the nurses and my older sister told me that they believed it was because I had played that song for him, and he died 6 weeks later. That song has obvious resonance for me, and every time I hear it, I burst into tears. And when I need to cry, when I'm feeling really depressed, I have a mix of songs that are curated for my crying sessions, and that's right in the beginning, and it kicks it right off for me.
And day by day, there's a man up here to claim.
Amanda Stern isn't alone in this curious desire to listen to sad music, even if it brings us to tears. In fact, when I asked listeners for their suggestions of sad pieces of music, hundreds of you got in touch to send me your favourites. I'll reveal what the most popular piece of sad music was at the end of the programme. But first, what exactly is it that makes a piece of music sad?
I'm Debbie Wiseman. I'm a music composer, and I write music for films and television productions. There are lots of different ingredients to create sad music. I mean, the best way of actually explaining it is if I take a tune and only use minor chords and then play you the same melody but only use major chords, I think you'll be able to hear the difference. This is a melody just using minor chords. And you can hear it sounds very gentle, very sad, very thoughtful. Now, if I take that same melody and add major chords underneath, it now sounds like this. And suddenly it's much more optimistic, and you breathe and you think, oh yes, that's a happy tune now.
So we've talked about the minor key. Is there anything else that you do differently when you're trying to write sad?
Well, there's lots of ways you can pull on the audience heartstrings. There's something called a suspended note, which is where two notes are very close together and the note that's suspended sort of tumbles down the scale. This is one of these suspended notes. And there's something about hearing these two notes which start as a slight clash that somehow makes you feel thoughtful, reflective, a little bit sad.
It's coming on Christmas, they're cutting down trees.
My name is Glenn Schellenberg. I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto.
So I wish I had a river I could skate away on.
The saddest song for me that I've ever heard, I think, is River by Joni Mitchell. That's primarily a consequence of the lyrics. But what I do is study musical features other than lyrics that make songs sound happy or sad.
Professor Schellenberg has been studying the psychological effects of music for decades. One of his most recent pieces of research was testing a hunch of his, that sad music has become increasingly popular.
We actually looked at how the pop charts in the US changed over the past 50 years, so since 1965. We looked at 5 years from each decade, and then our assistants listened to each song and determined whether the song is in a major or a minor key. So in the very first year that we looked at, 1965, the top 40 on the Billboard end of the year charts, all of the songs were in a major key.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something.
A lot of those Beatles songs were very up-tempo. But by the time we got to 2005 to 2009, major key songs actually made up a minority. And the songs that are popular now, a lot of dance music these days tends to be in a minor key. Kylie Minogue's I Can't Get You Out of My Head is a disco song that's in a minor key. I think that listeners feel a sense of sophistication, and so do composers when they write or listen to songs that have a more complicated structure in terms of the emotional valence that's being portrayed.
But just how universal is this appreciation for sad music? And do sad pieces of music share common characteristics? Well, when I asked you for suggestions for sad music on the World Service Facebook page, you wrote in with examples from all over the world. You wanted me to play songs performed by Armenian musician Jivan Gasparian on the duduk, which some call the saddest instrument in the world. You wanted to hear Scottish Highland ballads that sung of the longing for home. You wanted to hear Zimbabwean singer Oliver Ntukutsi sing about the grief of women who have lost their husbands.
Con él, con él, con él, con él, con él, son 5 minutos.
And you wanted to hear the tender voice of Victor Jara, Chilean musician and activist who was tortured and killed in 1973.
There are some elements that we've looked at that do appear to be cross-cultural universals.
David Huron is Professor of Music at the Center of Cognitive Science at Ohio University in the States.
The grief expressions, the breaking voice, people all over the world get this. When a singer has a cracking or breaking voice, people hear that as grief. The pharynx, so this is a part of your throat that constricts. It's what gives you that feeling of a lump in your throat when you're crying. That constriction has a dramatic impact on the sound of the voice. What it introduces is what we call phonological instability. So you hear that very characteristic cracking sound of the voice where you have this sort of alternation between high and low, and that also then gets reflected in the music.
Iranian singer Mohammad Reza Shajarian, known as the voice of Iran, is famous for his heartbreaking songs about his country. And thousands of miles away, in the United States, it's that same breaking voice that Chris Isaak uses to sing of unrequited love. do we choose to listen to such sad pieces of music?
7 years ago, my mother had bowel cancer, and she was very depressed.
Dr. A. Kawakami is a pianist and music researcher at Tokyo University.
I wanted to encourage her for the surgery. Therefore, I recorded classical music because she loved my piano performance. At first, I supposed that she would prefer music that sounds cheerful. However, contrary to my prediction, my mother said that she preferred listening to minor music composed by Johann Sebastian Bach. Her favorite music was Prelude No. 24.
Dr. Kawakami couldn't understand why her mother wanted to listen to sad music while in hospital. It led her to wonder whether people experienced positive rather than negative emotions when they listened to it. So she set up an experiment, asking 44 volunteers to listen to 2 sad pieces of music. The first piece was Glinka's La Séparation. The second piece was Blumenfeld's Étude sur mer. The research team asked the volunteers to select key words to describe 2 sorts of feelings: perceived emotion, what they thought the music expressed, and then felt emotion, what the music actually made them feel. They were surprised by the results.
People experience ambivalent emotions when they listen to sad music. Music that is perceived as sad actually induced romantic emotion as well as sad emotion.
While the volunteers thought the music expressed sadness, they recorded feeling positive feelings, such as romantic and sensuous, when they actually heard it. So the researchers concluded that listening to sad music could elicit pleasurable feelings. But what causes these pleasurable feelings in the body?
One of the things that we were interested in is what's the difference between people who listen to sad music and who love it, and people who listen to sad music and who just can't stand it.
Professor Huron and his team at Ohio University have a new theory that they're just beginning to test out about the surprising role of a hormone in creating pleasurable sensations when we listen to sad music.
In our research, it started pointing towards a hormone called prolactin. Now, prolactin, as you might guess from the name, is associated with lactation, for breastfeeding. When people cry, they also release prolactin. And there are circumstances in which prolactin seems to have this comforting effect. So the thought was that perhaps what's going on is that the people who are enjoying listening to sad music are receiving some sort of excess of prolactin, and people who are listening to sad music and they just find it incredibly sad and unhelpful and they don't want to listen to it, maybe they're not getting enough prolactin when they listen to the music.
It's a sense of self-soothing.
Sad music lover and writer Amanda Stern.
It may seem ridiculous to some people, like, why are you doing that to yourself? But really what you're doing is you're comforting yourself, and the music is in some ways some sort of a blanket or a mother figure or something. The songs are letting you cry, and that is a comfort. It's a natural comfort.
So it seems that sad music can actually soothe us, but Professor Huron warns us not to associate this with catharsis.
What we know from decades now of research related to crying is that crying does not have a cathartic effect, at least in the vast majority of cases. This is really contrary to our intuitions about things. So it doesn't appear to be that listening to sad music purges whatever sad feelings that I might have.
Apart from those warm, soothing feelings then, possibly induced by prolactin, Professor Huron argues that listening to sad music has other beneficial effects.
The research shows that for ordinary sadness, When we're in that state, we are our most deadly realistic in our self-appraisals. It has beneficial effects on judgment, on memory, all sorts of cognitive benefits that happen from being in a saddened state.
So perhaps those fears about the effects of our opening song, Gloomy Sunday, were unfounded. We like our sad music, but it doesn't necessarily make us feel sad, nor does it seem to purge us of any sadness we might be feeling. Instead, sad music can act as a giant blanket, comforting us and releasing hormones into our body that soothe, as well as helping us to reflect on our lives in a more honest way. So, if you're in need of some honest self-appraisal or comfort, sit back and listen to the piece of music that most of you who got in touch called the saddest music ever written.
This is a very touching, wistful piece. It expresses sadness and heartache. It's got a unique lyricism. There's a great simplicity to the tune. And the violin line. So simple, but it's beautifully simple, and it creates a sense of stillness.
For me, it's a time and a space where I can allow myself to be truly me, and it's private, and no one's going to walk in on me watching me weeping, and it's reliable. Songs and music, it's reliable. It's always going to create a mood, and it's always going to help you feel something.
You've been listening to The Y Factor with Helena Merriman. You can find details of the music you heard in the programme on the BBC World Service Facebook page or the Y Factor website.
There are dozens of different podcasts now available from the BBC, including news, documentaries, science, business, arts and sport. For details of them all, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.